Squares and square roots, practice number 2. 1. List all the whole numbers from 1 to 100 that are perfect squares. Also write the square root of each number below. We'll use a graphic organizer with squares and then square roots. We'll start with the square roots. If the square root is 1, 1 squared is also 1. If the square root is 2, 2 squared is 4. If the square root is 3, 3 squared is 9. If the square root is 4, 4 squared is 16. If the square root is 5, 5 squared is 25. If the square root is 6, 6 squared is 36. If the square root is 7, 7 squared is 49. If the square root is 8, 8 squared is 64. If the square root is 9, 9 squared is 81. And if the square root is 10, 10 squared is 100. So these are all the numbers from 1 to 100 that are perfect squares, and their square roots. 2. Determine the value of each square root, and you can use a calculator. The square root of 256 is 16, and the square root of 289 is 17. So the answer is 16 over 17. The square root of 225 is 15, and the square root of 400 is 20. So the answer is 15 over 20. The square root of 81 is 9, and the square root of 169 is 13. So the answer is 9 over 13. The square root of 25 is 5, and the square root of 196 is 14. So the answer is 5 over 14. Three. Which fractions are perfect squares? We'll take the 9 over 64, take the square root. The square root of 9 is 3, and the square root of 64 is 8. So the square root of 9 over 64 is 3 over 8. So yes, this is a perfect square. For the square root of 16 over 28, 28 is not a perfect square, so we'll try reducing the fractions. Both are divisible by 4, so 16 divided by 4 is 4. 28 divided by 4 is 7. Take the square root of that fraction. The square root of 4 is 2, and the square root of 7 is 5.714, and so on. So the denominator is not a perfect square, so this fraction is not a perfect square. For 32 over 72, 32 is not a perfect square, so we'll try reducing the fractions. Both of these fractions are divisible by 8. 32 divided by 8 is 4, and 72 divided by 8 is 9. Take the square root of 4 over 9. The square root of 4 is 2, and the square root of 9 is 3. So these are both perfect squares. So the answer is yes, 32 over 72 is a perfect square. And D, 63 is not a perfect square, so we'll try reducing 63 and 27. Both are divisible by 9. 63 divided by 9 is 7, and 27 divided by 9 is 3. We'll take the square root of 7 over 3. The square root of 7 is 2.645, and so on. The square root of 3 is 1.732, and so on. So neither the numerator and the denominator are perfect squares. So no, this fraction of 63 over 27 is not a perfect square.